Richmond, Virginia, 1984. A 7-year-old girl vanishes from a public library during story hour in broad daylight. For 41 years, her family searches desperately. Police find no answers, the case goes cold. Then in 2025, renovation workers make a chilling discovery in the walls of a historic building. Lila Penderson is finally identified through DNA. Her family receives closure they waited over 4 decades for, and a killer is brought to justice. How did architectural restoration and forensic science finally solve a mystery that haunted Virginia for generations? Stay with us as we uncover this heartbreaking case. Hello and welcome to the DNA Archives, where we dive deep into cold cases, missing persons, and the mysteries that DNA finally solves. If you're drawn to stories where persistence meets science and families find peace after decades of uncertainty, you're in the right place. Please hit the like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe so you never miss a case. Now let's go back to where this tragic story began. March 17, 1984, Monroe Park Branch Library, Richmond, Virginia. It was a Saturday morning, unseasonably warm for mid-March, the kind of spring day that brought families outdoors after a long winter. The library was hosting its weekly story hour for children ages 5 to 8, a beloved community tradition that had been running for over a decade. Among the families attending was the Penderson family, Martin and Claudia, along with their only child Lila. Martin was 41, a history professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. He specialized in Civil War-era Virginia and spent his days immersed in archives and old documents. His wife Claudia was 38, a chef who had recently opened her own French bistro in the Fan District. She worked long hours but always made time for Saturday mornings with Lila. Lila was 7 years old, small for her age with delicate features, long straight black hair that Claudia braided every morning, and dark brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was quiet, bookish, the kind of child who preferred reading to playing outside, who could spend hours lost in stories about faraway places and magical creatures. Lila loved the library more than anywhere else in the world. The smell of old books, the hushed voices, the endless rows of stories waiting to be discovered. That morning she wore a yellow dress with white daisies, white tights, black Mary Jane shoes, and carried a small canvas tote bag with a library card holder shaped like an owl. The Pendersons arrived at the library around 10:30. Story hour started at 11, but Lila always wanted to arrive early to browse the picture book section. Martin held the door open for Claudia and Lila. They walked past the circulation desk where the librarian, Mrs. Eleanor Chen, greeted them warmly. "Good morning, Lila. Ready for today's story?" Lila nodded shyly, clutching her tote bag. "What book are we reading?" Mrs. Chen smiled. "It's a surprise, but I think you'll love it." The children's section was on the second floor, accessible by a grand marble staircase that Lila loved to climb, counting each of the 23 steps. About 15 children and their parents gathered in the story hour corner, a carpeted area with colorful cushions arranged in a semicircle around a rocking chair where the librarian would read. Martin and Claudia sat on a bench near the back. They could see Lila sitting cross-legged on a blue cushion in the front row, her glasses sliding down her nose as she looked at the book Mrs. Chen was holding. The story that day was Where the Wild Things Are. Lila had read it before but loved hearing it read aloud, loved the illustrations, loved imagining Max's journey to the island. Mrs. Chen read with dramatic voices for each character. The children laughed and gasped, completely absorbed. Around 11:20, halfway through the story, Lila raised her hand. Mrs. Chen paused. "Yes, Lila?" Lila spoke quietly. "May I use the bathroom?" Mrs. Chen nodded. "Of course. Do you remember where it is?" Lila nodded. She had been to this library dozens of times, knew the layout perfectly. Claudia started to stand to accompany her daughter, but Mrs. Chen waved her off gently. "The bathroom is just down the hall. She'll be fine. We'll wait for her to come back before continuing." Lila stood, walked past the other children. Martin and Claudia watched her go. She turned left out of the children's section toward the hallway where the restrooms were located. Mrs. Chen continued reading after a moment, assuming Lila would return shortly. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Claudia frowned, stood up, walked toward the hallway to check on her daughter. The women's restroom was empty. No one inside, no sound of running water. Claudia's heart began to beat faster. She walked back to the story hour area. "Martin, Lila's not in the bathroom." Martin stood immediately. They both walked through the children's section, checking between bookshelves behind reading nooks in the small play area. "No Lila." They went downstairs to the main floor, checked the adult fiction section, the reference area, the magazine racks. Still no Lila. Martin approached the circulation desk, his voice tight with growing panic. "Have you seen our daughter? She left story hour to use the bathroom and now we can't find her." Mrs. Chen came downstairs, her face pale. She hadn't noticed Lila never returned. The library staff immediately began searching, checking every floor, every room, every corner of the 3-story building. Within 15 minutes, it was clear Lila was not in the library. The police were called. Officers arrived and began questioning everyone who had been there. Every parent, every child, every staff member. One library volunteer, a college student named Kevin Morris, remembered seeing a little girl in a yellow dress near the back exit around 11:25. He couldn't say for certain it was Lila. He had been shelving books and only glanced up briefly, but the timing and description matched. The back exit led to an alley used for deliveries and staff parking. Police searched the area immediately. They found nothing except cigarette butts and empty boxes. No sign of Lila, no sign of a struggle. Security cameras were checked. The library had only 2 cameras in 1984, one at the front entrance and one near the circulation desk. Neither covered the back exit or the children's section. There was no footage of Lila leaving or of anyone taking her. By noon, every police officer in Richmond was searching. K9 units were brought in. Lila's photo was distributed to every business within 10 blocks. By evening, her face was on the local news. A school photo from 2nd grade, her serious expression, her wire-rimmed glasses, her long black braid, and Lila Penderson was gone. The first week was a desperate blur of searching and waiting. Police interviewed every person who had been at the library that Saturday. Every parent, every child old enough to remember, every staff member, every volunteer. Kevin Morris, the student who thought he saw a girl in yellow near the back exit, was questioned extensively. He passed a polygraph test. His timeline checked out. He was cleared. The back alley was processed for evidence. Tire tracks were photographed and analyzed, but dozens of vehicles used that alley daily. It was impossible to determine which were relevant. One witness, a delivery driver, reported seeing a man in a gray jacket smoking near the library's back door around 11:15, but he couldn't provide a useful description. Just average height, maybe 40 years old. Nothing distinctive. Police searched for men in gray jackets, but it was March in Virginia. Half the male population wore gray jackets. Lila's photo appeared in newspapers across Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina. Tips flooded in from people claiming to have seen her. Someone reported a girl matching her description at a rest stop in North Carolina. Police investigated. It wasn't her. Another caller said they saw a child with glasses at a shopping mall in Alexandria. Again, it wasn't Lila. By April, 1 month after Lila disappeared, the case was losing momentum. The organized searches stopped. The media coverage faded. The volunteer efforts disbanded. Claudia closed her restaurant. She couldn't focus on cooking when her daughter was missing. Her passion for food had evaporated overnight. She spent her days walking through Richmond, showing Lila's photo to strangers, asking bookstores and libraries to keep watch, never stopping her search. Martin continued teaching at VCU because they needed income, but his lectures became mechanical, his passion for history replaced by the living nightmare of not knowing where his child was. His colleagues noticed he aged a decade in a matter of months. His hair turned gray, his face became gaunt. Every March 17th, the anniversary of Lila's disappearance, Claudia would go to Monroe Park Library, sit in the story hour corner, and read Where the Wild Things Are out loud to an empty room. The librarians allowed it, understood it was her way of keeping Lila's memory alive, of holding on to hope. Martin would join her sometimes, sitting on the same bench where they had sat that terrible morning, both of them crying silently. By 1986, 2 years had passed. The case was officially classified as cold. A detective named Sharon Morales inherited the file. She promised the Pendersons she would never give up. But Claudia could see the truth in her eyes. Everyone thought Lila was dead. By 1990, 6 years had passed. Claudia tried to reopen her restaurant but couldn't. The joy of cooking had been permanently extinguished. She took a job as a line cook at a hotel, work that required no creativity, just following recipes mechanically. Martin published a book about Civil War Richmond that he had been working on for years, dedicated it to Lila. His words on the dedication page were simple: "For my daughter who loved stories." They tried to maintain a normal life, but there was nothing normal about a home with a missing child. Every room felt too empty, every meal too quiet. By 1995, 11 years had passed. Claudia was 49, Martin was 52. They had both accepted they would probably never know what happened to their daughter. Lila's bedroom was kept exactly as it was for 5 years before Claudia finally packed everything into boxes. She couldn't throw anything away, but couldn't walk past that door every day anymore. The boxes were stored in the attic, labeled in Martin's careful handwriting, Lila's books, Lila's clothes, Lila's toys. By 2000, 16 years had passed. Martin retired from VCU. He spent his days reading and writing, working on a memoir about loss that he never finished. Claudia developed health problems, high blood pressure, chronic migraines. Her doctor said stress was killing her slowly. They stayed in Richmond because leaving felt like abandoning Lila, like giving up the last thread of hope that she might somehow find her way home. By 2010, 26 years had passed. Detective Morales retired. The case was reassigned to a younger detective who reviewed it once a year but had no new leads. Advances in DNA technology meant old evidence was being retested, but Lila's case had very little physical evidence to work with. Police had collected her hairbrush from home the night she disappeared, standard procedure for missing children cases. It remained in the evidence room, carefully preserved, waiting. By 2015, 31 years had passed. Claudia was 69, Martin was 72, both in declining health, both resigned to dying without answers. They had stopped doing the story hour ritual years ago. Claudia's body couldn't handle the emotional toll anymore. But they still thought about Lila every single day, still wondered if she had been afraid, if she had called for them, if she had suffered. The questions haunted them, more painful than any answer could have been. By 2020, 36 years had passed. Martin developed dementia. Some days he didn't remember Lila was gone, would ask Claudia where she was, why she wasn't home from school yet. Claudia would lie, tell him Lila was at a friend's house, would be home soon. She couldn't bear to watch him relive the loss over and over. Martin passed away in 2022. He was 79 years old. He died in a care facility, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in the past. On his good days, he would tell nurses about his daughter who loved books, who disappeared from a library, who he never stopped looking for. Claudia scattered his ashes in Monroe Park near the library. She whispered that if he found Lila wherever he was now, to tell her that her mother never stopped loving her. By 2024, 40 years had passed. Claudia was 78, living alone in the same house where she and Martin had raised Lila. She knew she didn't have much time left. Her heart was failing. Her doctor had told her she had maybe a year, maybe less. She made peace with dying without knowing, tried to find comfort in the belief that she would see Lila and Martin again, that all the questions would finally be answered. Then in January 2025, something extraordinary happened that would change everything. The Monroe Park Library was undergoing major renovations, the first comprehensive restoration in its 90-year history. On January 14th, construction workers were removing old plaster from interior walls on the second floor, planning to update electrical wiring and insulation. Behind a false wall in a storage closet near the children's section, they found something that made everyone stop working immediately. Skeletal remains, small, clearly belonging to a child, wrapped in deteriorated fabric. And beside the remains, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses and a small canvas tote bag with an owl-shaped library card holder. January 14th, 2025, the construction site was immediately shut down. Richmond police and forensic teams arrived within the hour. Dr. Patricia Allen, the Virginia State Medical Examiner, supervised the careful excavation of the remains from behind the false wall. The bones were small, fragile, belonged to a child approximately 6 to 8 years old at time of death. The remains had been concealed in a cramped space about 3 feet wide and 4 feet deep, accessible only by removing several layers of plaster and drywall. The construction indicated the wall had been built or modified sometime in the mid-1980s, sealing the space completely. Along with the skeletal remains, investigators found scraps of yellow fabric with a floral pattern, white synthetic fibers consistent with tights, and small black leather fragments from children's shoes. The wire-rimmed glasses were intact, child-sized, the lenses still in their frames. The canvas tote bag was deteriorated but still recognizable. The owl-shaped library card holder had survived decades in the sealed space. Detective James Rutherford, who now headed the cold case unit, was called to the scene. He looked at the evidence and felt his stomach drop. He had reviewed Lila Penderson's file just months earlier as part of a systematic cold case review, knew every detail by heart. 7 years old, black hair, wire-rimmed glasses, yellow dress with daisies, disappeared from this exact library in March 1984. He called Dr. Allen over, showed her photos from the case file. I think I know who this is. The location was significant. The storage closet was just down the hall from where the children's section used to be, less than 50 feet from the story hour area. In 1984, that closet had been used to store maintenance supplies accessible to library staff and maintenance workers. Detective Rutherford immediately contacted Lila Penderson. She was 78 now, living alone, her health failing. Mrs. Penderson, this is Detective James Rutherford from Richmond PD. I'm calling about Lila's case. We've found remains at the library that we believe may be her. Claudia couldn't speak. After 41 years, she might finally know. We need a DNA sample from you to confirm the identity. Can we send someone to your home? Claudia whispered yes, her voice barely audible. A forensic technician arrived at her house that afternoon, collected a cheek swab, Claudia's hands shaking as she provided the sample. She sat alone in her living room afterward, looking at photos of Lila, wondering if she should feel relief or devastation. The waiting was excruciating, but it was a different kind of waiting than the past 41 years. This time there would be an answer. 2 weeks later, on January 28, 2025, Detective Rutherford called with the results. Mrs. Penderson, the DNA is a match. The remains are Lila. I'm so very sorry. Claudia let out a sound that was part sob, part gasp. After 41 years, she finally knew. Her daughter hadn't been taken across state lines, hadn't been held somewhere far away. She had been in the library the entire time, just feet away from where Claudia had sat reading Where the Wild Things Are every anniversary for years. Detective Rutherford continued gently. Based on the location and the forensic evidence, we believe Lila was killed shortly after she left Story Hour and was concealed behind that wall. We're treating this as a homicide. The cause of death couldn't be determined due to the condition of the remains, but the manner of concealment suggested foul play. Do you know who did this? Claudia asked, her voice raw. We're investigating, Detective Rutherford said. We're examining who had access to that area in 1984. We're reviewing the original case files with modern technology. The investigation moved into high gear. Forensic teams returned to the library. They documented every aspect of the concealed space, took measurements, analyzed the construction. The false wall had been built hastily, not professional work. Someone with basic carpentry skills but not a trained contractor. Behind the wall, investigators found something else. A maintenance tool belt forgotten or hidden with a name tag sewn into the canvas. Property of G. Whitmore. Detective Rutherford ran the name through databases. Gerald Whitmore had been a maintenance worker at Monroe Park Library from 1982 to 1985. He was 38 years old in 1984, responsible for repairs, painting, minor construction projects throughout the building. When Lila disappeared, Whitmore had been questioned briefly. He said he was working in the basement that morning, repairing a leaking pipe. No one could confirm or deny it. He had no criminal record at that time. Nothing to raise suspicion. He was cleared and the investigation moved on. In 1985, Whitmore quit his job at the library, told his supervisor he was moving to North Carolina for family reasons, left no forwarding address. Detective Rutherford tracked Whitmore through records. He had moved to Charlotte in 1985, worked various maintenance jobs, kept a low profile. In 1989, he was arrested for assault, served 18 months in prison. In 1995, he was arrested again for breaking and entering, served 3 years. In 2003, he was questioned in connection with the disappearance of another child in Charlotte, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. The case remained unsolved. Whitmore died in 2019 at age 73 from a heart attack. He had been living alone in a trailer park outside Charlotte. No family, no friends. No one claimed his body. Detective Rutherford requested tissue samples from the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office, samples that had been stored from Whitmore's autopsy. The samples were compared to trace evidence found in the concealed space, skin cells on the tool belt, DNA on the fabric that had wrapped Lila's body. 3 weeks later, the results came back. It was a match. Gerald Whitmore's DNA was all over that space. There was no doubt Whitmore had killed Lila and sealed her body behind that wall. Detective Rutherford called Claudia with the news. We've identified the person responsible. His name was Gerald Whitmore. He worked maintenance at the library in 1984. He died in 2019. Claudia felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that she knew the truth, fury that justice would never be served, grief that had been building for 41 years finally released. She asked the only question that mattered: did she suffer? Detective Rutherford chose his words carefully. Based on the evidence and the location, we believe it happened quickly. She wouldn't have been afraid for long. It was minimal comfort, but it was something. Investigators pieced together what likely happened. Whitmore had been working near the children's section that morning, had seen Lila leave story hour alone, saw an opportunity. He intercepted her in the hallway, possibly told her he would help her find the bathroom or that her parents were looking for her. He took her to the maintenance closet. What happened there was unclear, but Lila died, whether from asphyxiation or blunt force trauma couldn't be determined. Whitmore panicked, realized what he had done, concealed her body in the storage space, then over the next few days built a false wall to permanently hide the crime. He continued working at the library for another year, walked past that wall every day, then left Richmond when the guilt or fear became too much. For 41 years, Lila had been in the library behind a wall just feet away from the story hour area where children still gathered every Saturday. Detective Rutherford spent weeks building a complete picture of Gerald Whitmore's life, trying to understand the man who had stolen Lila Penderson's future. What emerged was a portrait of a deeply troubled individual who had hidden in plain sight for decades. Gerald Whitmore was born in 1946 in rural Virginia. His childhood was marked by poverty and instability. His father was an alcoholic. His mother worked multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. He dropped out of high school at 16, drifted through various manual labor jobs, learned basic carpentry and maintenance skills working for contractors. In 1978, at age 32, Whitmore was arrested for peeping into windows in a residential neighborhood. Charges were reduced to trespassing. He served 6 months probation. In 1980, he was questioned about loitering near an elementary school playground. No charges were filed. He was warned and released. In 1982, Whitmore was hired by Richmond Public Libraries as a maintenance worker. His background check showed only the 1978 misdemeanor, nothing that raised serious red flags. He was quiet, solitary, did his work competently. Supervisors described him as reliable but odd, someone who made people uncomfortable but they couldn't articulate why. One former librarian, now retired, told Detective Rutherford that Whitmore used to watch the children during story hour, would find excuses to be near the children's section even when there was no maintenance work needed there. I mentioned it to my supervisor once, she said. Told her it gave me a bad feeling, but she said we couldn't discriminate against someone for being awkward, that he hadn't actually done anything wrong. Now, decades later, that retired librarian carried guilt for not pushing harder, for not trusting her instincts. On March 17, 1984, investigators believe Whitmore was working near the second floor that morning, possibly planning, possibly waiting for an opportunity. When Lila left story hour alone, walked down the hallway toward the bathroom, he approached her. Lila would have trusted him. He was an adult. He worked at the library. She had probably seen him before during previous visits. Whatever he told her convinced her to follow him to the maintenance closet, a space children would never normally enter. The closet was small, cramped, filled with supplies and tools, no windows, a heavy door that muffled sound. What happened inside will never be fully known, but forensic evidence suggested Lila died there quickly, without prolonged suffering. Whitmore then faced a choice. He could have called for help, claimed it was an accident, faced the consequences. Instead, he chose to hide what he had done, wrapped her small body in a tarp, concealed her in the storage space at the back of the closet. Over the next few days, he built a false wall using drywall and plaster, materials readily available in the maintenance storage. He worked after hours when the library was closed. No one questioned a maintenance worker doing repairs. The wall was crude but effective, sealed Lila behind layers of construction material that would remain undisturbed for 41 years. Whitmore continued working at the library for another 14 months, participated in the search efforts, expressed sympathy to Lila's parents when he encountered them. In June 1985, he gave notice, told his supervisor his mother was sick in North Carolina, that he needed to move to care for her. It was a lie. His mother had died in 1979, but no one checked. No one had reason to suspect him. He moved to Charlotte, started over, tried to leave the guilt behind, but it followed him. His arrest record in North Carolina showed a pattern of escalating behavior, assault, breaking and entering, behaviors consistent with someone spiraling. In 2003, when an 8-year-old girl disappeared from a Charlotte library, police questioned Whitmore because of his proximity to the scene. He denied any involvement. His alibi was weak, but they couldn't prove anything. The case went cold. That girl was never found. Detective Rutherford contacted Charlotte PD, requested they reopen the case, see if there were any connections. Whitmore died in 2019 alone, no funeral, cremated by the county because no one claimed him. He took his secrets to the grave, leaving behind only the evidence he couldn't erase, the DNA that finally exposed his crimes. Claudia was informed of everything investigators had learned. She sat in Detective Rutherford's office, listened to the timeline, the details, the theory of what happened. When he finished, she asked quietly, "Was there anything we could have done differently? Could we have saved her?" Detective Rutherford shook his head. "Mrs. Penderson, this was not your fault. You couldn't have known. No one could have known. He was a predator who hid well and chose his moment carefully." Claudia nodded, but the guilt remained, the eternal what-ifs that plague every parent who loses a child. The case received significant media attention, not just because it was solved after 41 years, but because of where Lila had been hidden. The library where families continued to gather, where story hour continued every Saturday, where children played and read just feet away from where Lila's body was concealed. It was haunting, tragic, a reminder that evil can hide in the most innocent places. The library temporarily closed for psychological support services. Counseling was offered to staff, to families who regularly attended programs, to anyone traumatized by the discovery. Mrs. Chen, the librarian who had been reading Where the Wild Things Are that day, was 83 now. She gave a statement to reporters. "I have thought about Lila every single day for 41 years. I have asked myself what I could have done differently, whether I should have stopped the story to accompany her. The guilt has been crushing. Now at least we know the truth. Now at least she can be laid to rest properly." The library administration announced they would create a memorial garden in Lila's honor, a space dedicated to all children, a reminder of innocence lost but never forgotten. On March 15, 2025, Lila Penderson was finally laid to rest at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, the same cemetery where her father Martin was buried. The funeral was attended by hundreds, former librarians, community members who remembered the case, advocates for missing children, strangers who had been moved by Lila's story. Claudia sat in a wheelchair, too weak to stand for long. She held a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, the same book Lila had been listening to when she disappeared. A colleague of Martin's from VCU gave the eulogy, reading from the dedication Martin had written in his book years ago, "For my daughter who loved stories." Lila loved books more than anything, he said. She loved this library, she loved learning, she deserved a lifetime of stories, and that was stolen from her. Claudia placed the book in the casket before it was lowered, along with the Owl Library card holder that had been found with Lila's remains. "Read all the stories you want now, baby. Mommy and Daddy are waiting for you." It has been several months since Lila Penderson was finally laid to rest. Several months since Claudia got the answers she waited 41 years to receive. The pain hasn't disappeared. Grief this profound never fully heals. But there is something different now, something that allows Claudia to breathe a little easier in her final days. Closure. Claudia's health continues to decline. Her doctors say she has maybe 6 months left. Her heart is failing, her body worn down by decades of grief and stress. But she tells anyone who will listen that she can die in peace now, that she knows where her daughter is, that Lila is with Martin, that they're finally together again. She visits Lila's grave every week, brings fresh flowers, usually daisies, to match the yellow dress Lila wore that last day. She sits on the bench nearby, reads children's books out loud, finishes the stories Lila never got to hear. "I'm coming soon, baby," she whispers to the headstone. "Mommy will be there soon and we'll never be apart again." Claudia has spent her remaining time working with the Lila Penderson Foundation, established by former colleagues of Martin's and members of the community. The foundation provides funding for library safety programs, background check systems for public facility workers, and support for families of missing children. Every public library in Virginia now has mandatory check-in and check-out procedures for children under 12 during programs. No child is ever allowed to leave a supervised activity alone. All maintenance workers and contractors who have access to areas where children gather must undergo comprehensive background checks, not just criminal records but employment history and personal references. The changes came too late for Lila, but they've already prevented potential tragedies. Several individuals with concerning backgrounds have been denied positions that would have given them access to children. Monroe Park Library reopened in April 2025 after extensive renovations. The storage closet where Lila was found has been completely removed, that entire section of the building reconfigured. In its place is the Lila Penderson Memorial Reading Room, a bright, beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows, comfortable seating, and shelves filled with children's books. At the center of the room stands a bronze statue of a young girl with long braided hair and wire-rimmed glasses, sitting cross-legged with an open book in her lap. The plaque reads, "In memory of Lila Penderson, 1977 to 1984, who loved stories and believed in the magic of books, may every child who enters here feel safe, valued, and free to imagine." Story Hour continues every Saturday in the new reading room. Attendance has actually increased. Families wanting to honor Lila's memory by keeping alive the tradition she loved. Mrs. Chen, though retired, still attends occasionally. She sits in the back and watches the children, grateful that Story Hour survived the tragedy, that Lila's love of books continues through others. The case led to significant legislative changes in Virginia. The state passed comprehensive background check requirements for all public facility workers who have contact with children. The law also mandates that cold cases involving missing children be reviewed every 3 years, using the latest forensic technology available, ensuring cases are never truly forgotten. It's called Lila's Law, ensuring her legacy protects other children and brings answers to families still searching. Claudia attended the bill signing ceremony in her wheelchair, too weak to speak but present as the governor signed the legislation into law. Detective Rutherford has continued investigating whether Gerald Whitmore was responsible for other crimes. The 2003 Charlotte case remains open. DNA evidence is being re-examined. 2 other unsolved missing children cases from the 1980s and 1990s are being reviewed for possible connections to Whitmore's employment history and movements. The truth about one monster may help solve multiple tragedies, may bring closure to other families who have waited decades for answers. The library where Lila disappeared has become a symbol not of tragedy, but of resilience, of communities coming together to protect children, of never giving up on finding truth. Claudia knows she won't live to see all the changes Lila's Law will bring, won't see all the children who will be protected because of lessons learned from her daughter's death. But she finds peace in knowing Lila's story matters, that her short life had meaning beyond the tragedy, that she's still making a difference 41 years later. DNA doesn't forget. Even when concealed behind walls, even when evil tries to hide its crimes, even when 41 years pass and hope seems lost, DNA remembers. And because of that, families like the Pendersons can find peace, can finally say goodbye properly, can honor their loved ones with the truth they deserve. Lila's story is a reminder that justice may be delayed, but it doesn't have to be denied, that science and determination can uncover even the darkest secrets, and that a parent's love survives everything, even death. If this story moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us continue bringing stories like Lila's to light, stories that need to be told, stories that deserve to be remembered. Leave a comment below, share your thoughts, tell us how cases like this impact you. We read every single one and we're grateful for this community. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the DNA Archives. We're committed to bringing you more cold cases, more mysteries solved through DNA, more stories of truth, justice, and families who never give up. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and remember, the truth is always worth searching for no matter how long it takes, no matter how deeply it's hidden. We'll see you in the next case.